With limited or no time on the field in the preseason, will the Bills' starters be sharp for the Steelers? Plus, how recent injuries could impact what the Bills do on cutdown day. And does Brandon Beane still have a surprise move before the season begins? That all comes up on this week's edition of the Buffalo Plus Podcast.
Welcome back to the Buffalo Plus Podcast, presented by Canadips. We're here, Mike Catalana, Dan Fetes. I'm Jenna Cottrell. As the Bills get ready for their preseason game against the Packers coming up, and then those cuts right around the corner. And then right after that, we have the Bills opening up their season against the Steelers at home. Mike, I want to start with you because, we're not sure in terms of what this preseason looks like, but we know that regular season is coming up. How sharp, or how can these guys stay sharp, these starters that don't play in the preseason? What can we expect for them? Because we know there's high expectations on the season.
I'm not worried about it. I'll be honest with you, I'm not worried about it. The other day I was watching, Mahomes play. Look, it's Andy Reid. It's Patrick Mahomes. They wanted to get a few series in. He didn't look great. Now, you can make the argument that he's getting that rust out of the way and then go to the first game. I'll be honest with you, I don't think it makes one bit of difference, those 3 series he played in that game. You want the guys healthy and ready to go. And with this case with the Bills, look, as we're recording this, Sean McDermott hasn't spoken yet specifically about it, but his pace has been to say the starters aren't playing. I'm with him on that. Josh Allen will be ready. Look, the guys have been banged up. They've had problems on the offensive line, wide receivers out. You're not getting that full group out there anyhow offensively. They can create, and you guys have been there. We all been at camp and at practices. Yeah. You can create a lot of that on the field, and certainly they had it last year. So I think they'll be sharp. And if they're not 100% sharp, it's been that way before when guys have played in the preseason. I just am a believer in getting out of this healthy and getting ready to go, and I'm not worried about it.
Yeah, I've changed my tune. I think on the last podcast, I talked about Jenna and I were team. You got to get Josh some reps. You got to get him to see some live bullets. That was our side, especially after seeing Spencer Brown play and some of the other guys maybe just struggle. I'm not saying they were bad. I'm just saying injuries have crept in a little bit in this preseason, getting banged up. The thought of Josh Allen getting blindsided by Spencer Brown or somebody, even Dion, who's not 100% back, really caused me concern to be let's bubble wrap Josh, get the $258 million man into the preseason. And guess what? If on the opening drive they go 3-and-out against the Steelers, so be it. Again, max, we would see Josh for 2 series. That's going to be the real thing that shakes the rust off. So if it takes 2 series against Pittsburgh, then it takes 2 series against Pittsburgh. This was also a team that last year, guys, didn't have a preseason and they were fine. They came out of the gates blazing then. So I've changed my tune. I can admit when I have to say Mike was right, and I can admit when I was wrong, and to say that again, just get to this preseason, give me 2 quarters of Davis Webb and give me 2 quarters of Jake Fromm, and let's go to the regular season.
Yeah. Dan, I'm actually going to agree with you as well. And I think we can say, without saying Mike was right, we can say that the injuries have massively impacted things because you want to make sure.
Can I say one? Yeah. I think it's interesting looking back that the Bills never had a joint practice. I see teams all around the league that had not just one joint practice, but multiple joint practices. New England had 2 different ones. We've seen it with Minnesota and Denver. And you see those reps. I mean, there were fights at the Bucks ones. That's the intensity. Now, again, I want to preface this by saying Bills practices have been intense. These didn't feel like training camp. They felt like regular season practices. This offense kind of just picked up where it left off. But I know COVID's a thing. I know Brandon Beane talks about it's worst nightmare to have a positive case and what they're going through now with a trainer testing positive and contact tracing, all of those things. Guys, I'm just surprised that, Josh getting reps, even if it was, Sanders on a different corner that just isn't from the Bills. I think would have been big. I wonder what they do moving forward. Obviously, they've done it in Carolina. I guess I was just a little surprised. I don't know what you guys thought about that.
I initially was surprised just because so many other teams, like you said, around the league were doing exactly that. And then when I kind of thought about it, I feel like if I were Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott, I kind of would want to insulate the team as much as possible from other teams, just considering the COVID situation and also like with the protocols changing this year and with things being kind of on a sliding scale as well, just in terms of like the world. I think it made more sense in terms of that. Look, I think they really liked when they went down to Carolina. Like, I think they got a lot out of that a couple years ago. It was so hot. Sorry, I'm just remembering how hot it was.
It was
down
hot this
there
week
in-
too, Jenna.
Yeah.
It was hot this week.
Okay. So here's the difference though between the preseason games and those scrimmages and the when they have the joint practices. Preseason games are total vanilla.
Yes.
And they don't want to show anything because everybody gets that film.
Yeah.
And the agreement with teams when they have the joint practices is it's just between those two teams. So you do it with somebody you trust and, nothing. So you can play a little more of your regular offense, regular plays in those circumstances. Yeah, because, a lot of times now there have been circumstances where they play a team. A good example, I just happen to see the Eagles are playing the Jets. And they do play them in the regular season. They always play the Jets in the preseason. And then, they have a scrimmage. They do play later in the regular season. Neither team is any good. But that's a different story. But normally you would say, I don't think they're really worried about what plays they bring out when they play each other in week 9 or whatever it is in the regular season. But that's normally the case. That's why in the season it is, those games themselves, while they're live reps and they are tackled to the ground, which is different. That's the part too. We always think about the offense. We're also talking about tackling them to the ground. You can also make the other argument. I know we're going to talk about injuries. We just saw it happen in practice the other day and looked like Jordan Poyer is the one who hit McKenzie at the end of a play, right during a play, but right at the end.
Right.
And McKenzie's out. So it can happen in practice too. But obviously,
I see what you're saying, Mike, just very vanilla because like I looked back at watched that Chicago game again. And everybody's like, and even I was like, wow, Brian Daboll, like look at how good he is. He was running the most bland plays, nothing new. Like I looked at these preseason games as it's just talent more than it is coaching and scheming. Like there's no scheming. And like I even remember like when Sean McDermott went to halftime, and like, oh, we gotta, Justin Fields is good. We got to keep him in the pocket. And then he ran all over the place. And it's like, you don't think they would have spied him? You don't think they would have had DNs like setting edges and keeping him contained in the pocket? No, they're just rushing. Hey guys, when the ball snapped, go try and tackle him. And he was faster than some guys. So I get what you're saying. And that's an interesting point that I didn't know that film just stays with those two teams that do the joint practice. Because I imagine that is very valuable to both teams on how they're evaluated.
Yeah, I mean, look, Belichick does it twice. Most seasons does it twice. And he's as secretive as it gets. You think he's, piling stuff out there. And you could always argue maybe you don't give too much away. He's playing against Joe Judge and the Eagles, the two scrimmages that they had, the two joint practices. And so I think coaches really like it. But I'm with you. I'm a little bit surprised. Jenna's got a good point about the COVID thing. Maybe that played into McDermott's thinking. But I think that is a big part of the future of these. These preseason games have become 3 games to evaluate the younger players. It really is, or new players or guys coming off injury. It's not, I really believe we're going to see even less and less of the starters even on the field in these games.
Yeah, I agree. Hey, we want to take a second though before we get into the injuries because that's going to play a major role in how cuts go down and what this roster looks like. And we want to do a quick shout out to Canadips. Thank you so much for sponsoring this podcast. This is the tangy citrus flavor. Recommend. Really good. They also have a really cool, actually recommend a lot of the flavors. Mango. Hat tip to that one. We do want to take a second though, because they're having a really cool contest going on right now. It's called the Game of the Year. So Canadips is basically a CBD, it's non-nicotine, tobacco-free dip that you can do that you don't spit out, but it's got the CBD in it and it makes you feel pretty good. But the Game of the Year is one winner is chosen. The winner is being chosen in a couple days. And basically you get to go, one winner is chosen and they get to bring a +1 to any regular season NFL game with airfare and luxury hotel lodging for 2, as well as great seats for the game. So there's a lot of Bills games that we can think of that would be awesome to do this. So one lucky winner is going to be chosen You can head to canadipscbd.com and enter, or go to the official Canadips Instagram page. Make sure you write it all the way out so you find the one with the blue check mark, but you can enter there. And again, that one winner will go to the game of the year. Sorry, morning voice. Game of the year. And you can check out any game this season with free hotel, free lodging, great seats for the game, and a +1. So check it out at canadipscbd.com. And there's a lot of games Bills fans will want to go to. But let's talk about who they would see on the field at that game, because sorry, you mentioned the injuries, and we were talking about it yesterday, Mike and I, because when the injury report came out, it was long, and we're entering the third preseason game. We know the season's around the corner, and it's like, it's concerning. You have Levi Wallace on there, Isaiah McKenzie, you have Taron Johnson, you have Harrison Phillips, you have, Deion Dawkins. We know he's getting better, but he's not 100%. Stephon Diggs was coming back from that knee injury. Mike, that affects the team so much. And I think it affects it in a way that maybe people don't even realize heading into this week of cuts.
Well, okay, so you made a good point of listing those guys. And on the plus side, it appears the starters are going to be close to 100%, by the time we get to the first game, barring anything else, because Diggs has looked really good.
Mm-hmm.
He's out there dancing. He's Diggs. Deion, good for him. He got through that game. I'm sure he'll get snaps in this game too. They got to get his win back. They got to get him healthy. They look pretty good there. Corners, when you got those corners sitting out, Dane Jackson too, that's a problem. So where I think it impacts the team, there's always a concern at corner. Every team is concerned at corner. I don't care who you are. But here's where it impacts them. What do you do at the end when you're making those cuts and then you're making those decisions? So keep in mind what Brandon Beane's got to do. He's got to get down to 55. I think it's 55 now. And then everybody says, well, bring the guy back on the practice squad. Let's use Marquez Stevenson as an example. Okay, but you have to expose him to waivers. Mm-hmm. You cut him if that's the case, and you need to get him back. So if they're banged up at wide receiver and you need him for the active roster, you're not cutting him. Well, that comes from another position. And they have some real decisions to make on both lines of scrimmage too. How many guys they're keeping, who's in the rotation. So if guys are banged up, Harrison Phillips is a good example. Let's say, we don't know yet, but let's say Harrison Phillips is going to miss the first month of the year.
Yeah.
Well, that might very well mean they keep a guy, maybe Butler, that maybe Butler was considered on his way out, that he's not. But then they keep both of those guys, and Phillips just goes inactive. So this becomes a numbers thing. And that roster, Dan, we've seen it. Man, that roster is fluid. When it's not like in the old days where you got cut, you're on the team, and here we go. It's fluid even from the moment they make those changes. But these injuries are going to impact that.
I mean, we're even seeing it right now with the Bills adding Sims, a return guy, which, obviously you need a return guy here because you lost two of them with Stevenson's foot or ankle. He was in a boot when he left. He was doing some work on the side yesterday at practice. And then obviously McKenzie was in a sling. So you bring in, this returner, wide receiver in Sims, but that also makes you wonder, like, how long is the McKenzie injury? How long is the Stevenson? And that's what Mike, you're kind of guessing. You may say like, hey, we think he's going to be back, or we think McKenzie's going to be back in 3 to 4 weeks, or we think Harrison Phillips is going to be back in 2 weeks. Like, all of a sudden you have setbacks. Like, again, this is such a fluid part. And Mike, I know you talked about it to me the one year that you get down to 53, but it's really not until like the next Tuesday when like you really finalize everything. Like people are like, okay, they made their cuts. They're good. This is the team they're going to go into week 1 and week 2. And it's like, no, like, because all of a sudden you maybe somebody that you wanted to keep so that he didn't go on waivers. So other teams then set their roster and you go, okay, now we feel safe kind of putting him out there and like hoping he comes back. Like there's a bunch of those moves that still need to be made. And again, some of those guys, especially, again, I'm looking at the D line too, that we've talked about, just how competitive it is in just that whole motion, that whole group. Man, Harrison going down is a very tricky situation to handle because thought he was playing pretty well, flashed again in that Chicago game. They want to keep depth, but are you going to keep, a lot of people thought that after Stevenson's kick return or punt return, they may keep 6 wide receivers. And I don't know if that's the case now, because if you got to keep an extra defensive lineman because you got injuries or an extra corner, I don't know, maybe they see something with Wild Goose because they don't know what Dane and what Levi are doing. Like the wheels have to be spinning in Brandon Beane's head, and he's also just got to be talking to the team doctors, wondering how long is he out? Is he going to be 90%? Is he going to be 95? Is he 75%? So this is these injuries that, as I joked around about on air the one day, this injury report, the length of a CVS receipt, is getting very, very tricky to figure out how the rest of this roster is going to be handled.
Is that your own? That's your own, the CVS?
Yeah, that's my own. I came up with that all on my own.
That's outstanding. Because you're sitting there, I'm halfway to the parking lot, and the thing is still printing. And I'm good. You know, I can be a little dismissive that way sometimes. I don't know. You guys may have seen it on occasion.
Oh, maybe once or twice.
I just may walk out. Jenna, this is what's big. Now, keep in mind, too, you know, the fluid movement between the practice squad and the regular roster helps a lot early on. But I'm talking about getting guys there. And then there's also using the IR because they can designate, you know, there's a amount of guys that can come back after 4 weeks, but even that is 4 weeks. So there's a lot of decisions to be made. And this is what we always talk about. You know, when the Bills were a bad team, they were always scouring every other roster. And when a guy like Stevenson flashes, he flashes not just because he had a punt return, but because he's fast. And teams will love young players that are fast, and especially bad teams. So I'm just picking him. If you throw him out there, you know, he's put it on tape. Somebody's grabbing that guy, I think. Sometimes we say that about players and, you know, they can go through. And then there's also the idea of if you make that cut with all the other cuts, think about what teams got to do. I mean, they're scouring through over 1,000 players who are released. I do believe we used to think, you know, you can sneak a guy out early because it's the first cut. Well, now you're only cutting like 4 guys. Yeah. And then you cut a ton at the end. Imagine that. Imagine going through that and then determining, is this guy better than what we have? Is it worth picking him up and all those things? So, and then you try to get him back for the practice squad and everything else you deal with. So I do think the injuries, and to your point, the length of those amount of injuries and the positions, places where they're always looking for that depth, corner, O-line, D-line, that's a big deal.
And you're right too, where it's now people are looking at the Bills in terms of, instead of the Bills looking at other teams and being like, oh, maybe we can pick someone from here. Or maybe they know around the league that the Bills have a good roster. And I mean, you look at the deep one. What did you say?
And a deep roster.
And a deep roster. Exactly. Yeah. So when you look at the players that are being cut, there's a lot of talent that's going out there. And like you said, a guy like Stevenson who had a flash, pretty open flash, like people could talk about it, see it in the preseason game. And it seems like a more dangerous guy to cut. I will say though, too, I asked Brian Dable on Wednesday, it was like, we talk so much about the playmakers on this team. Like, who's a guy that's more under the radar that has kind of impressed you? And as soon as I asked him, he's like, oh, it's a good question. Ooh. And then I knew in my head, I'm like, he's not going to answer because practice squad, because he's thinking of, I'm not going to say a certain guy because I don't want other people to tweet about it. I don't want that word to get out there. We're going to try and probably sneak this guy onto the practice squad. So
was the guy, it was probably based on a 12 personnel. That was probably another thing that Dable was being real secretive about. Watch out for the 12 personnel when the Bills pull that one out.
So Brian Dable was asked about use of 12 personnel. And you guys know, you're smart football fans that are listening. It's 2 tight ends. And the lack of times that the Bills did that. And the question kept going about it and about, well, you didn't do it last year. Well, they scored 1,000 points last year.
Third best offense in the league. Yeah. And he was being questioned about a personnel that he didn't run last year. Dable got a good kick out of it. It was with a reporter. It was all in good fun.
Yes.
And then Dable went up to, came back to us before practice and said, I'm going to run all 12 personnel today. Like, that's what it is. So that was
Jenna, Dable's my guy. So, okay. I know he said good question and all, but okay.
Well, that's a good question, Mike. No, I mean, look, we, Yeah, we're at the point of the season too where I feel like it's regular season mode. Like
Right.
we're all buttoned up. We are like we're not getting a lot out of
You know,
the
I'm good with asking about the sixth offensive guard. I'm good with training camp. Like I'm ready for regular season.
Yeah.
I'm ready to talk about other
we know.
teams
Mhm.
and not the breakdown of the seventh corner and where we're going. I'm
Yeah.
all good.
Oh, we
All
know
good.
Brandon Beane has been in the minutia of that. Dan, do you maybe expect a little surprise Brandon Beane move? What do you think as we get closer to the regular season?
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be the LaShawn McCoy cut that maybe some of us saw coming a few years ago when he was kind of overturning the roster. But
Mhm.
I just look at so many guys that the team just really likes and fits the process and what they're doing.
Mhm.
And the one for me, and it's just kind of going back and forth, the guy that just hasn't shown me much in the preseason is, and Mike talked about him earlier, Vernon Butler just hasn't done much for me. And now he was in close contact tracing. So he's going to have to be out of the building for a couple days. I just think that Justin Zimmer has played better than he has. I think that other guys around him, I think Harrison Phillips has played better than Vernon Butler. I think other guys like F.A. Abada bring more versatility that could also play inside as well as outside. And we talk about Leslie Frazier being like, yeah, like you almost want the D-line somewhat positionless at times, that like everybody can just kind of move around and play all the different ones. So I see other guys that have versatility. We've seen Zimmer has played edge a little bit. He has played inside. And Butler really just hasn't shown much. I know he took the salary reduction, which is usually kind of you take this, you're good. But that's just, I don't think that Brandon Beane's in this business of handouts and keeping a guy on the roster that has done him a favor to save some salary cap, to say, I don't know. That was my one where the one guy that I looked at from last year's roster and go, I just don't know if he fits now, Mike.
All right, Dan, I think you make an excellent point on him. Look, we can say you go by what they say. So when he was asked about Butler, I think it was Leslie, they were all very positive about Butler and what he's contributed. But what they did was playing deep into the fourth quarter in the game in Chicago.
Yeah.
And I know they had some guys nicked up in the game, but seriously, like Vernon Butler's been around. And if you're playing in the fourth quarter of a preseason game, you're a guy trying to make the roster. I think it's fair to say. Right? It's the fourth quarter of the preseason game. Okay, so I think it's also the kind of guy, sometimes they do make deals. Deals are made. I mean, he is a veteran guy who's played. There are teams that are light on the D line. I'm not saying to make a trade, you get a ton for him, but sometimes it's player for player. Sometimes it's for a conditional draft pick, like whatever it is. It's the kind of guy that's going to happen. But Beane's going to be making moves. I think he's absolutely going to be making the move for a veteran tackle, offensive tackle.
Okay.
I think he's going to need that. I think they got to figure out, look, it's Spencer Long has played.
Spencer Brown.
Oh, I keep
Spencer Brown.
Spencer Brown.
Spencer Brown has played, but he's mostly played left tackle, right?
Mm-hmm.
You need a guy that can play left and right. Deion's coming back. Like, they need that guy. And I don't believe they have that guy on the, Ike Butker's pushed outside sometimes and all, but you better know how to play tackle. And there are guys in this league, maybe not superstars, but guys who can play both sides. I think they're going to look for that. And I believe they're absolutely going to be in the market for a veteran corner at some point, coming off another roster. If for nothing else, for depth, doesn't even mean it's a guy who's on the field week one, but I do believe they're going to be looking for that too. So, Jenna, you're right. This roster's got a lot, but there are some spots that are concerning. And I think those are two places. Look, it'll probably happen now that I'm going to put the gauntlet down and say, I don't see Zach Ertz coming to this team.
Yeah. Wow. I'm so glad you can accept that.
I'm not admitting defeat because Ertz, by the way, reports to the guys I know in Philly say he's been fantastic at camp. And that's not the team putting that out. That's reporters. They're like, Ertz is a little defiant. He went blonde. He's doing his commercials, by the way. It's because his wife is probably more famous than him. But he's done that. And I just don't see them making that. I don't see the Bills making that deal. I still think he's probably going to go somewhere, but I don't see the Bills making that deal. But I do think, Beane's going to be aggressive. And if there's guys out there that can help them, they're going to make it. And those are the positions I really think, O-line and corner, that he's going to be looking for veterans to come in and help.
And that's also part of it too, is that Bobby Hart was signed in the offseason, and he has just been horrendous. I feel very bad for Fromm and Webb, who have to just constantly look over their shoulder at an opposing defensive end ready to kill him. But that's one of the things that happens when we get all excited over the offseason. Like, I can't believe it. Like, this guy's got all these starts. And it's like, and the one thing that is kind of telling to do is see what was talked about a player before he was cut or traded. So, like, there were a lot of really good things that were coming out of Jacksonville about Joe Giles Harris. Like they liked him. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, like that, like the Cincinnati Bengals, the Cincinnati Bengals were like celebrating that they got rid of Bobby Hart. And so, like, kind of the telling things like that. But I agree with Mike, because while I think Spencer Brown could be there, and I think is that long-term play, like, he's just not ready right now to fill in. And like I said, Mike, the point is that, like, Deion's shoe comes off for a play. Somebody's got to come in there and make sure Josh doesn't get killed. And like somebody that has blocked NFL linemen and can just fill in and is ready in a snap of a finger. So I agree with Mike there too. Yeah. I'm agreeing with Mike a lot on this pod. It's really weird.
Well, and look, we all sort of no. Jenna hasn't admitted being wrong, because Dan did and I did about Ertz. But
I said I agreed with you.
Yeah, you agreed, but we admitted fault. We admitted being wrong.
We're bigger people.
Admitted to changing my decision when more information was available.
Oh man, are you running from office? Here's what I would say. I mentioned the versatility. You guys know this from any sport you play. When the coach will sometimes say somebody's versatile, that means they can play multiple positions. Mm-hmm. Sometimes when they say they're versatile, that means they can't really play one of them.
Yeah.
So, we'll try him here. Dan, the guy in baseball, like, all right, he can play, he can play infield and outfield, and they're like hiding him somewhere. Right. Yep. So that's where sometimes you would look at guys and say, yeah, they can play multiple positions. Well, they failed at multiple positions sometimes. Mm-hmm. So I do want to see that because they're going to need it. And especially to the point we made in the beginning, early in the season when, they've been nicked up at a couple of these spots.
Yeah. We'll have to see. We know it's going to be a lot going on. There's going to be a lot of movement in these next couple of days to weeks as we get ready. Thank you for sticking with us this morning, listening to my voice.
Jenna whispering.
Hey, Jenna,
I swear.
You're doing okay.
I haven't had coffee today. We'll have plenty more updates on Buffalo Plus. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe.
Can I add one thing?
Yeah, of course.
You guys can see the Connors and Ferris training camp logo.
Yes.
We want to thank Greg Connors and Connors and Ferris. They are the overall sponsor of the Buffalo Plus YouTube channel and Buffalo Plus, the television show that is going to begin. Let's see, it would be a Thursday, the first Thursday of the regular season. It'll be live here on YouTube every Thursday night. And then that show will also air, if you're in Buffalo, on Fox Buffalo and Fox Rochester, as you're getting ready for football Thursday mornings at 10:30 on those two channels. So we thank Connors and Ferris, and we're looking forward to being on here live and taking your comments and all those things. Again, that's September 8th, I think it is, right? That Thursday, the night of the first game of the season.
Yep.
We'll be on here live on YouTube.
Yeah, we thank Connors and Ferris. We thank candidates. We thank you all for joining us. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And also check us out on Instagram. We have a page, Buffalo Plus _. Be sure to follow us there, as well as we keep you updated on everything Buffalo Bills as we get ready for the start of the season. For Mike and Dan, I'm not Dan. I'm Jenna. We'll catch you next time on the Buffalo Plus podcast.